This week I am on vacation in Florida, in case you cannot tell. And on the 9-hour drive here, I had just a few minutes to think about 5 things that I have learned while reviewing audio products here on my YouTube channel, which I started just about 18 months ago. I thought it'd be fun to run through those 5 things since I really don't have any gear or anything that I can review while I'm here in Florida. Also, thought it would be fun to show you some of the weird and creepy things going on in our Airbnb because we've all been there and this one has some odd things. Let's jump into all that next. Now, one of the first things that I learned after starting this YouTube channel is that I had a pretty incorrect assumption when I first started this channel, which was that Class D amplifiers sounded bad and should be avoided at all costs. Think aiyima, fuzzy audio, things along that line. And then I got lured in with the myth of the aiyima T9 and I did a review on the product. And while I was listening to it, I was actually surprised at how well it sounded. Now, I'm an old school guy, so I do still tend to prefer the sound of Class AB over D, but these Class D amplifiers are improving all the time with every new version that's released. And they really do sound well, especially for the money that you're going to spend. Now, what I honestly really realized, and I mentioned this in a video about the Fuzzy Audio TB10D amplifier, I think, but I really think that these Class D amplifiers are the future of hi-fi. Now that freaks a lot of people out because A, they're made in China, and B, they're affordable, and C, they're Class D and they just don't want to mess with it. But what my point was to that is that everything needs an entry point. All industries need an entry point to lure people into spending more money. And I really think these companies like aiyima and Fuzzy Audio have done that. They've given people something that they can get for less than $100 that can power their stereo system and sound well enough to get them hooked into thinking there might be something better that I could buy. And at that point, they may begin to start researching products by Emotiva or Schiit Audio. And then from there, that may lead to Marantz or Yamaha or PS Audio or something really expensive like that. And that's why I think that these small Class D amplifiers really are kind of the future of hi-fi. Now, will they ever really be considered hi-fi? I don't know. Honestly, I actually really don't care. Because to be honest with you, these little Class D amplifiers make for a great office system. They make for something you could put in your garage. They're going to give you plenty of power to power any speakers that you have laying around. And that's what most people need. They just need something small and compact that they can get up and running in no time and hearing great music. You got to remember, a lot of these folks are coming from listening solely on AirPods or through an Amazon speaker, or like, God forbid, just listening to it on their phone, like the speaker on their phone. That's what some people use. They put in a bowl, you know? So the idea that they can get something for less than $100 that's a Class D amplifier and get up and running and have great sound is something that I have come to acknowledge and something that I have learned is okay to recommend to people when they're first getting started in hi-fi. Also, when you come out back of our Airbnb, you're sort of welcomed by this a shed thing here with this terrifying door. What is going on with this thing? Look at this. Look, everything's just like nailed in there so many times. Some of the nails are just sticking out. Look at this thing. I have no idea what purpose this serves, but I'm just really hoping no one jumps out of it in the middle of the night. The second thing that I've learned since starting this YouTube channel actually surprised me, and that is I really enjoy the sound of low watt amplifiers. Now, I spent a lot of time in vintage audio for the last several years, and in that marketplace, you can get caught up a lot in watts and power, and is your receiver so big that when you pick it up, you get a double hernia? Meanwhile, I've been listening to this last year a lot of low powered amplifiers, a 6-watt tube amp, the 2-watt schiit rekkr, which I still love. I'm using it in my office, even the 10-watt gjallarhorn. And what I realized with these low powered amplifiers is they often provide a lot of detail and nuance in music that I could not hear with higher powered amplification. And that's not to knock lots of watts and power. I'm not saying necessarily one is better than the other, but if you're someone that has spent a lot of time with large wattage receivers, you may want to consider, if you have the right speakers, something I'll talk about next, you may want to consider trying out some of these low watt amplifiers. It can be really interesting to hear these things in music that I never heard before when I was using more high powered vintage gear. But that's going to lead me to my third point, because I think in order to enjoy a high watt or a low watt amp, you really need to have the right speakers. Let's talk about that next. On top of the horror shed, if you're walking through the backyard and you're just kind of gingerly looking around and you don't look down, you might miss what appears to have been a table that has completely sunken into the ground. I don't know what this is. It's like it really does look like the top of a table that just sunk into the ground. This whole thing right here is just basically goodbye ankles, hello emergency room. Now we're talking about 5 things that I have learned here with this YouTube channel, and these are just things that surprised me when I reviewed products. They're not necessarily things that I'm telling you are the definite way of building out your system, because we all have different tastes and likes, but these are, you know, again, a handful of things that I really enjoyed after starting this channel and listening to a lot of products. The third thing is related to speakers. Now, buying speakers absolutely stresses me out. I always think I'm buying the wrong one. I think I'm gonna have buyer's remorse. I'm always worried I'm not pairing the right amp with the right speakers. It's stressful. That is until I bought a pair of 1984 Klipsch Heresy speakers. I believe I got that year right. I actually made an entire video about those here on my channel if you'd like to watch that. Now, everybody knows that Klipsch rates their speakers different than other companies, but this has a high sensitivity rating of 96, so it's probably closer to 90. But what I found is that I really love the way those speakers pair with these low power amplifiers, which makes sense because if you've got speakers in the sensitivity level of the 80s, the low power amps just really don't have enough power to get the best sound from those speakers. So by getting a higher sensitivity speaker, it really allows you to get the best sound from the low watt amps. And that is exactly what I found to be true. I thought that the schiit gjallarhorn sounded really great with my Klipsch Heresy speakers, which is funny to think about a 10 watt amplifier powering my entire home system. I also have a 6 watt tube amp that was sent to me by a manufacturer in China that I reviewed on this channel. And again, it sounded so much better with the Klipsch Heresy speakers than it did with my other bookshelf speakers, whether that be Emotiva or others. And so again, if you're somebody that is kind of looking for maybe to change things up in terms of sound, and you've got a lot of high powered receivers and your speakers are all in the 80 dB sensitivity level, like from 80 to 88, something along those lines, and you're thinking, oh, I watched this guy on YouTube and he said buy a low power amplifier and everything will sound great. Well, before you do that, make sure that you also consider buying the right set of speakers to go with it, because again, what I learned is that pairing a low powered amplifier with high sensitivity speakers is really interesting, and it's allowed me to hear a lot of new things in music that I haven't heard before. And it's something that I suggest to friends if they're ever thinking about completely overhauling their system, or they're just lost in that rabbit hole of watts and power and what they need. Sometimes I can say, have you ever considered buying a 10 watt amplifier and pairing them with a high sensitivity speaker? And it completely blows their mind because they're thinking they just need a lot of power. So that's the third thing that I have learned, which is, man, high sensitivity speakers with low powered amplifiers really brings out things in music that I've never heard before. I just want to point out that our Airbnb here has this transition here, and it's like a small step up, and I have tripped over this thing, I don't know, 30 times at least. Now, the next 2 things I've learned have to do with digital playback, and I have to tell you, I'm a little entertained by the people that are offended that I name my channel Forever Analog and I review digital playback products like CD players or external DACs. Like, I know it's hard for your brain to process that I said analog and I reviewed digital, but I promise we can still be friends if you just don't take things so literal, okay? We'll get there, all right? But here's my first thing. I had never used an external DAC with a CD player before I started this channel. And one of my most popular videos is how to connect an external DAC to a CD player, because I'll be honest with you, I didn't know how to do it. So I bought a schiit modi DAC, connected it to a CD player, and at first I was like, I don't know that I hear that much difference. But after a while, after the DAC really broke in, again, it came back to me hearing new things in music that I hadn't heard before, especially when listening to CDs. So I'm always suggesting to folks that they should maybe consider getting an external DAC, especially if they're using a vintage CD player. Now that's a hot topic because a lot of people think that vintage DACs sound better than modern DACs. That's a video in and of itself that I'm not quite sure I want to get into today. But what I want to tell you is that I think it's fun to add an external DAC to a CD player or even to a wireless streamer and just see if, or just try and hear if you can hear any new things when listening back to your music. It may surprise you. You may not hear anything at all. Some of my favorite comments are about how they do blind tests with DACs and people can't tell the difference. Awesome. I've been able to use a few different DACs and can actually hear some of the differences. Again, doesn't make me any better than you. It doesn't mean that you're wrong or I'm right. It's just, I think, based on everyone's tastes and how they hear things. So external DACs, that one actually surprised me. I also thought it was kind of worth pointing out that this picture here of the beach and a surfer right there, it's hung horizontally and it should be hung vertically. Okay, finally, the last thing that I learned with this YouTube channel is that people still love CDs. My most popular video, it's like an insane amount of views. It's me comparing a Blu-ray player to a CD player. I just thought of it on a whim. I had no idea that people would be that into watching that comparison and have that many opinions about it. But it also leads me to believe that there's still a viable market out there for CDs. And so if you're a new artist out there, please keep releasing music on CDs. You don't have to make a bunch of them at a time, but there's still a great value for the money. I was at a store here in Florida yesterday. I saw new records for $38 and $42. Like, that's a lot. I love to buy music in quantity, so I'm tempted to buy 4 CDs over 1 record. Now, that doesn't mean I'm throwing away my record collection or selling it. Definitely doesn't mean that I'm done listening or buying to records. I still buy them depending on the artist, but there's times when I look at the sticker price and I just get a little like, oof, and I will actually go out and just find a CD copy of it instead. Because also to that point, wireless streaming has come a long way, and you compare it with a DAC and it sounds great, but there is still something about the physical CD that I have found to just sound a little bit better than some of the wireless streamers and services out there, especially if you're using a service like Spotify. A CD will actually surprise you about how different it sounds in your system over just streaming Spotify. But I just honestly, every time I think about making this video about 5 things I've learned, the fact that the CD player videos on here are the ones that are most watched and oftentimes most commented on leads me to believe that CDs are here to stay. They don't have to beat vinyl records in sales in order to be the #1 format. I don't even know why we care about which format is #1 these days. But I still think it's great that people love buying CDs. I hope people continue to make them. You can find them for great deals, even though the prices are creeping up. And you'd be surprised, you know, you get a new CD player, throw CDs into your collection, even if you've been listening to vinyl for a while. And I promise you, the CD's not going to sound as bad as you once thought it did. So that's my final thing here. Like, could not be more surprised that that has been my most popular video here on YouTube. Blu-ray versus CD player. What are you going to do? Now, normally I would tell you to watch a video somewhere around here, but I haven't quite decided what that video should be because I've mentioned quite a few things in this video. So I'll list a lot of videos down there. I'll probably throw something up there just for fun that you can link to and continue watching. But thanks to everyone that has watched my channel up until this point. I'm going to go inside because it is just humid out here. And hopefully nothing scary is going to come out of that shed and attack me in the middle of the night. Thanks.